Oh, hello. How are you? Welcome to the continuous improvement using a system model with and the best method. And this is in the conference track, Cutting Edge Practices. I'm Ellen Quinn, your moderator. I'm also the QMD chair. And we are most grateful this morning for QI Macros for sponsoring this session. Our speaker today is Grace Duffy. Grace has over 45 years of experience in successful business and process management with corporate, government, education, and healthcare. Grace leverages her experience as president, CEO, and senior manager to help organizations enhance their performance. She's also a past QMD chair and longtime colleague of mine whose guidance and wisdom are most appreciated by me. Housekeeping for the session, it's 45 minutes in length. The questions and answers will be at the end, and please enter all questions in the chat window, please. Depending on the number of questions, we might not get a chance to answer all of them, but Grace will have her contact information at the end, and you can email her if your question was not addressed. Thank you, and over to you, Grace.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Ellen. And I'm looking at the ASQ Synergy for Success logo, and I love that somebody put the world on the circle and not in the middle. So we are actively engaged, and that's really what we're trying to do today. So I'm really, really pleased. Yes, welcome to continuous improvement with the continuous improvement model, the best method. I want to share with you what is turning out to be a really, really fun journey that I have been on using some of the materials from ASQ, the government division, and the quality management division in what we do. So, what I'm going to talk about today, just a number of objectives here. I'll talk about the systems approach for defining work streams. Many of you know process maps, got it. Using the best practice election system operations map that was developed by the ASQ government division. And I'll talk about that here in a bit. And also developed by a team from the ASQ government division led by Richard Mallory, who is also a past chair of the government division, the ANSI, American National Standards Institute, G1 guidelines for evaluating government operations. Then we'll talk about a little more detailed an audit framework, a best framework that I and a colleague wrote a book on several years ago that defines and documents best practices. And I've applied this to Lake County, Florida elections operations. I'll talk about that and why and how I've been doing this. We'll look at continuous improvement because the whole idea of an audit is to find opportunities for improvement, to find a way to climb that maturity, organizational maturity ladder up into best practice. This is this combination of the best practice election system operations map and the NCG1 guidelines give us direction that we can then use as a real audit foundation for best practice. And then, along with the continuous improvement ideas that we found, we've also looked at a crosswalk to help the best practice election system operations team update this system operations map for 2026. And we're looking at the theory of what they put together in the map with the reality of one county in Florida in elections integrity and in elections best practice. And then, yes, I will make sure to end in time that we can have some conversations. And I suspect that Richard and others may be on this session, and maybe they can talk in and answer some questions if they're here. If not, I'll get them and I'll try and get answers from them as well. Now let's look at this ANSI G1, the primary measures for best practice. Now this organization or this let me get rid of this thing out of the way. Here we go. This standard was published in 2021, and it is a foundation for election integrity. It is a foundation that really came out of the work that we did after the 2020 elections. You'll remember that ASQ issued a white paper, published a white paper on elections integrity. And I was involved in the initial team that put the integrity project together. And then we handed it to ASQ when Ann Jordan was still CEO. And she and the fellows group and a number of other organizations within ASQ expanded it into a full white paper that ASQ published itself. And I'm sure you'll be able to get that white paper off of asq.org. Now, the ANSI G1 has objective measures. It has a description of systems maturity and process maturity that I'll share with you during our wrap up of this session. But it looks at measures of quality practice. How do you know that you are at a level 3 organizational maturity or a level 4 organizational maturity? Uh, I won't go into the levels of maturity other than to explain them in a summary with the system and process level uh, tables that the ANSI G1 folks have put together. But you can find an awful lot on system and organizational maturity if you're interested. But what it looks at is provide a structural system. So I want to take you through a little bit of that we can then use as a foundation for audit. Oh, and by the way, you can get this ANSI guideline. Now, ANSI funds itself by selling these guidelines. So I'm not going to tell you it's a free ASQ download publication. There is a price for it, but it is available through ASQ and ANSI at asq.org. The idea of a system, we all know. I'm preaching to the choir here, but if we want to have a system best practice, now this is just a modification of the same SIPOC that we teach everybody all the time. But we have different activities. And those activities, if we look, combine together to be a process for a specific output. That's good. Now, these projects and processes all need to work together. And that's the idea of the systems concept. Yes, again, I'm preaching to the choir. But what I'd like is the fish bones that are at the bottom of this particular chart. You've got an activity in a group and a milestone. For those of us in Six Sigma, we've got a stage gate where we have our measurements. We define those output measures. And for those of you in education and in organizational and systems design, you know that once you set an objective, the next thing you do is how are you going to measure to know that you met that objective? That's where we go into leading and lagging indicators. If you're at an activity level, you want to have leading indicators that tell you you got that activity correct before you move all the outputs of that activity into the next activity so that that activity is going to work as properly as it was designed. So then you take a look and say, well, did that work? Great. What are the positive or influencing factors on how that particular activity performed? How do I use those influencing factors and how do I further improve them to continue going up the maturity ladder? So you have a series of these, and then you have your project outputs in what you have, and that then meets your requirements. So you're looking at good management is basically what this is. So let's see where this takes us. Now, the systems operations map is a detailed offering from the government division that says, okay, we've got the ANSI G1 standard, but that standard needs to work for all government organizations, not just supervisors of elections. So, what the government division did was get together in a second team. And again, Richard Mallory led this with some of his colleagues and came up with 11 components of election operations. And then they defined what should be in those processes for election operations to come up to best practice. They identified 11 of these activities: establish and maintain accurate voter record, produce, distribute ballots, hire, train, support election workers, deploy and ensure system secure IT, conduct election operations, conduct operations for absentee voting and mail, and by mail, count and account for all votes and ballots, tabulate, verify. You can read these things as well as I do, the audits and complaints, whatever. The issue is, how do you then know that you're performing these activities properly? Well, let's take a look at these. What are excellent operations? Outcomes and outputs. Active and valid voter list. Votes are cast only by eligible voters. Again, take a look at these. Easy to vote. It is very focused on helping the registered voter to be able to vote effectively in their precinct and where they are, and then that we have auditable records. Well, I looked at this and figured, wait a minute, this is great. I had been an election observer, a watcher, not a worker, for the 2024 elections operations in Lake County, Florida. I live just north of Orlando in Lake County. So I looked, let me make sure I get the timing on this right. I went to training as an election watcher, and I watched the early voting elections, and I was really impressed with the smoothness of the flow, the crowd movement. I was impressed with the movement of the ballots from one station to the next. I was impressed with how well the elections workers, the paid staff, treated those who came in to vote. If there was a question, if there was an issue, if somebody was in the wrong precinct, if somebody was blind and needed assistance, there was a caring. There wasn't any contention going on in the room. If somebody was at the wrong precinct, they found the right precinct and got an address and sent them to where they could go. Now, I'm confusing a little bit with the early elections with the Tuesday election, because in early elections in Florida, you can show up at any of the voting places within the county and just vote. And that actually makes a difference in how you set up the voting. If you don't know who's going to walk in the door, you have to have the ballots for all the different candidates and all the different election uh, opportunities, election candidates, so that people can say, I'm from, Mount Dora precinct number 5, give me my ballot. And so you have to have the availability of all of those. For the actually Tuesday, November 5th, or whatever it was, you went to your particular precinct. So it was easier to know who was going to walk in the door. So you have to think all of that to begin with. So we audited some of these items. Let me share with you what happened. Okay, over here. There we go. Now, what I really like in sharing with you what happened is what did happen. Now, let me get this little jobber out of my way here. Get out of here. There we go. Sorry, I've got to look at the comments. I'm trying to see if there are any chats coming in at the same time. That chat window really gets in the way. But those of you who have presented know that. So let's look at one particular of those activities. The system map looking at in-person and early voting is one of those 5 election activities. What's the objective for it? Well, election planning. All vote sites are well used, process voters within time limits and smoothly. Can you figure that you can get measurements out of those? Of course you can. Block marketing, ballot marking devices, and ballot marking has no issues. Some of the precincts use paper ballots that people fill in the ovals on. Some people have, well, we aren't going to do hanging chads in Florida anymore, for those of you who remember that. So we don't do that anymore. Uh, but we have the ballots, and we want to make sure that there are no marking issues, no overcounts, no undercounts. People aren't voting for more than one candidate in the same race, those kinds of things. And those are all measurable activities. So you want to have those, you want to audit to make sure that they're there. Then there are certain activities and sub-activities to this process. The election site, planning to meet voter demand. So there's preparation. Do we know how many sites we need? What's a capacity? As many of you know, if you're auditing something, there should be 3 types of measures. You want capacity measures. Do you have enough? Do you want process measures? Will it do what it needs to do? And do you have outcome measures? Did it get you the result that you wanted? So this map of this particular activity for elections operations then gives you a suggestion on how you would want to set up this particular activity. Pretty much like Baldrige. It's a system. It's how we work. It's how you and I as quality professionals think. So what I have been doing, what I did was meet with the Supervisor of Elections for Lake County, Dr. Alan Hayes, after I had observed what was going on during the early voting, and I asked him if he would be willing to meet with me and to have me go through and basically assess his processes against the ANSI G1 standard and this system's election operations best practice map. He was delighted. He really was interested. Now, we realized that this was 2024 and an election year. It wasn't like he and I were going to stop absolutely everything and we were going to start auditing. So we waited until January. So let me come in here. And what kind of measures were we going to use as we assess to make sure that his system was working properly and was supporting the registered voters in Lake County? Here are some of the measures or the concerns, failure modes and risks, and possible measures that Richard Mallory and his group out of the government division suggested for this activity 5. So not only does this system map, which by the way, you can get either through me, get my email address, or you can probably find it on the government division map. But if you want to copy this thing, it's available to you for free, by the way. Just grab my email off of the last slide. What are the things that you really want to watch for, the gotchas in person and early voting? Well, think about it. Lack of sufficient voting sites. There aren't enough places for people to go. Remember COVID, we weren't voting, we wanted vaccinations, but same queuing theory, same issue. Unused or underutilized vote sites. Did we spend all that money to reserve a site, to set it up, to get all the staff there, and we throw a party and nobody shows up? Failure to accommodate handicapped or disabled voters, electrical internet failures, lack of necessary ballot marking devices, insufficient ballots. We run out of ballots, incorrect ballots, complaints, lack of privacy, all those kinds of things that you and I know, if we're registered voters, that we might anticipate going in to do our civic duty that day. And again, what possible measures will you have? Timely, correct analysis, peer reviewed planning documents, preparations, timely correct contracts for the voting sites, wait times to vote of 30 minutes or less, no waits caused by lack of power. So there are things that are going to prompt you in thinking a way to set the maturity of your process and to make sure that you are meeting your voters' needs. Well, here are Dr. Alan Hayes and Steve Hines. Dr. Hayes is he's a doctor of dental medicine, by the way. He is not a doctor of political and voter integrity. Delightful man. And Steve Hines, who is the assistant supervisor of elections. Both of these men have been working with me since last January. We're now, what is this, back end of July. And we have been through 7 of the 11 activities. We are having a ball looking at this thing. I am a certified quality auditor, so I have the credentials to go in and work with them. And Alan's approach to being a supervisor of election is the testament of quality that people at the supervisor of elections listen and learn how to make it better. When I went and met with him, he welcomed the opportunity to look under the covers of his processes and to make them better. And both Alan and Steve have met with me pretty much once a week. Sometimes, I mean, we have vacations and we have hurricanes and we have all over things. But basically, we've met once a week and we've gone through 7 of these 11 processes in looking at what we're trying to do. Now, here's another view of all those 11. I keep falling into the term process because that's what I do for a living. But the best practice activities is what the best practice election operations systems map calls them. We've been through 7 of them now. We'll start on number 8 next, I think August 11th, and we'll finish these up. We've already written 1 paper on how we're doing the auditing and some of the crosswalk that we've done in finding differences between the reality of what happens in Lake County, Florida, and what happens here in these best practice activities. That's waiting. It's through peer review now with one of the journals, and we'll see what happens. So hopefully you'll be able to read more about it, and I'll be able to tell you more if you're interested in a follow-up after the session. Now, I used a very detailed auditing. Let me be careful. Let me back up on that. It's not very detailed. Validating a Best Practice is a book that Dr. Van Newland out of Belgium and I wrote, back in, 2020, as a matter of fact, looking at ways to assess a best practice, a process for best practice. This book has 2 different assessment models. One of them is very detailed and tracks an awful lot like the assessment model that's available from the government division if you want to use the ANSI G1 National Standard for Election Integrity. And that one is like 72 different criteria or characteristics, I guess, of a best practice. And it will take you a while to go through. And then you assess yourself. Am I 25% there, 50% there, 75% there? Do I meet it 100%, whatever it is? There's also one that Dr. Van Newland developed that we have practiced and used around in the US. In fact, we've used it pretty much internationally, and it only takes about 20 minutes to see if you're in the ballpark of a best practice. And that's the one we've used with this activity number 5. We haven't done that to the level of all 7 activities that we've done so far, but we are getting to the point where we can see a best practice. So, what is this best method that I'm talking about? Either the 72 characteristic model or the quick scan, which is only 42 criteria. And it's based on the Plan Do Check Act cycle. It's, in fact, you'll see it. I'll give it here you an example on the next couple of slides. We call it the best method just to get a nice acronym for it: better way to excellent results and success through the application of appropriate tool. But it's a universal approach that you can use for any process. The book has a number of examples where we have just taken a best practice write up or an annual report from a company. One we did was Loblaw Services out of Canada. They have this fantastic way to reduce their carbon footprint in how they transport groceries and materials around Canada. And their write up is just phenomenal. Somebody could follow this to do a best practice and a benchmark. It's wonderful. So these universal characteristics will get you to a level of best practice. Now, the best method, I've talked already about the criteria and the characteristics, but it also gives you assessment checklists to then compare to get that gap analysis that gives you the opportunity for a PFMEA or to look at a risk analysis to improve your own processes. Here is and it won't fit on one scan to one slide so you could read it. So I've split it up into 2. Here's an overview of a best practice. Look, and you can see we start with the Plan Do on this slide. We want to look at the results. Both any of you have been Baldrige examiners, or you've gone after Baldrige. Anything you do may be great, but you better get the results that you promised your customer. So we first start and say, what are the results? And here you can see the criteria. I won't take you through the whole details because I want to share with you other stuff, and we're already a ways into this thing. But we look at the description. The enabler is how are you using, what improvement approach are you using? You can use the DMAIC, and if you want, use my email, and I hope you transfer this slide or this model into the DMAIC format rather than the Plan Do Check Act. But use an improvement cycle. We chose to use the Plan Do Check Act because it is universal. How do you describe what you're doing? What are your stakeholders? What are your preventive activities? Are you sure about the integrity of your data? Then, if we come to check in the act, the second half, are you integrating your processes into the complete system? Are you auditing? Are you monitoring? And we can have the codes you can see in this one column of the material that you're reading in the best practice documentation or your operations manual, if you want to call it that. Either the material's not available, it's not documented, but frankly, you can read between the lines and you're pretty sure it's there, or it's complete, or it's pretty close, but it's incomplete. It needs some work. And then there's an area for comments, and we work through this. So I use this chart with activity number 5 with the Supervisor of Elections for Lake County, Florida. Now, the other piece, and I just referred to it here, is a process isn't a process unless it's documented. And then if you're going to use it as a benchmark or write it up as a best practice, write it up so that somebody else can use it to benchmark their own activity. And that's really what the government division did with their best practice system operations map for elections. There is a title to the systems map. There's a subject. We know who authored it. Any of you have written your operations documentation for your organization, for your production line, whatever it is. You know that you need to know who the author is. You need to know what the context is. Is it different in Europe than it is in China than it is in the US? Have you described your method and results? It doesn't need to just be in text, it can be illustrated. Many of you know that operations manuals are great if you have pictures in them. Is the process described? Do you have the key performance indicators? Do you have your lagging indicators? Do you have 11 leading indicators and measurements? Do you use cause and effect? Is there a date and revision level? So you want to have all these items in your documentation so that people can take it and use it. Your own workers can use it, but people can use it as a gap analysis with their own. Now, the other piece is we went through all those characteristics that I mentioned on the quick scan food, is that we're able to use, now I am using the old FMEA, the non-AIAG format, just simply because I had it. We None of the improvement efforts that we came up to as we went through the audit. And I will tell you, let me stop for just a second. It was so fun to watch Dr. Hayes and Steve Hines thinking through. You could see their eyeballs roll back into their heads when we would look at a particular activity in election integrity or in election operations. There is one step in activity 5 that says the tabulation machines, the voting machines, are installed and they're checked and they're validated before the voters come into the polling place. You could see Alan and Steve roll their eyes back and think through what is there in the setup. And there is a whole document that their technician, their technical manager has put together on where are the tabulation machines stored? Is the environment proper for those tabulation machines? Do we get them on site at the right time? Do we know that they are sealed and they are clear? Do we know that the counters are set to 0? Do we know that nobody else has access to them other than people who have been validated and have the right? It was amazing to have them go through that. And then they invited me at the end of November 5th, the evening of November 5th. I went to this operations location to watch all those tabulation machines come back off of the trucks and have the staff, the vetted staff, and you had to have a badge to be in that room, to download the counters, unload the USB thumb drives, to make sure that all of the provisional ballots and all the spoiled ballots, everything was there. It was just clockwork. Absolutely amazing to watch. But what Steve and Alan have done is as they go through a process, they'll say, I could do this better. There's something here that we could have done better. And they have meetings with the clerks at the end of every election event and say what could be better. They get the information back from their employees. And we've logged them on this kind of a chart just because I happen to like it. They didn't know about this chart, so I just used this one. For those of you who like the new AIAG format, you could use that as well, and it'd be fine. But note, there's one 5.2.0 on this chart: selection and confirmation and contracting, making sure that there are adequate voting locations. There is a new development going up on one side of the road, going off to, wherever it is. On the other side of the road, there is a development that's already populated out. They've got a community room that's big enough for polling. The new site on the other side of the road is not going to be that large, and it's not going to have a big community center. So they aren't going to be able to go there to vote. So what they're doing is anticipating working with the development on the other side of the street so that they can have dual precincts in that same voting location. It's big enough, they can get enough machines, and they can work through it. Now, because there is a workaround for that, if, for those of you who take your new hat off and put your old RPN hat on, then you'll see how severe is the issue. Well, they know what the issues be, so it's only about a 3 on a scale to 1 to 10. But how often does the cause of the failure occur? Well, if it's every single time they have to vote, that's a 10. It's happening all the time. And then how well can you detect the cause? Well, you detect it really easily because you know that there's no voting location on one side of the street. You got one on the other. So if you do your standard RPM, 3 times 10 is 30. Well, I was sort of trained years and years ago, and those of you will scoff at me because of my age. But unless you have something that's a score of 250 and above, that's not really something you're going to jump right on, but they still want to work on it. So this list, even though it's not a high priority item, it's an absolute wonderful way to save action items for the future. So I've been delighted that they have not been protective. They've not been confrontational about any of the things that have come up. I've suggested some things, but they're finding ways to make this system better. All right, let me get here. The other thing that I mentioned is we're doing a gap analysis, a crosswalk between the Lake County Supervisor of Elections operations and the best practice system elections operations map that the government division put together, just because we wanted to see what the differences were. And I wanted to give the feedback to the government division because they're doing that update in 2026. One of the big ones, and I put brackets around this, in activity 5, it is listed as in person and um, virtual, and in person and vote by mail. Well, or come on, let me get the writing. I'm going to come back on you. Don't die. Don't get mad. Conduct election operations in person and early voting, because the vote by mail's activity 6. Okay, let me come back. Don't get dizzy. Here we are. There we are. Lake County. For Lake County, in person voting is different for November 5th than it is for early voting. Now, every state does elections differently, so I can only speak to Lake County. Lake County is in Florida, and Florida has a centralized voting process. It has a centralized office in Tallahassee. Now, each supervisor of elections is empowered to manage based on their demographics and based on the things that work well for them for their site locations. Supervisor of elections also can decide how long early voting is going to be. Is it going to be 7 days? Is it going to be 8 days? Is it going to be 10 days? There's a limit, but they can worry on that frame. Well, with in-person election, it's just one day. You bring the tabulation machines in the day before, you check them all out, you make sure the ballot's all there, the whole thing that we talked about. And then at night, you close them all down, reseal the machines, make sure nobody can mess with them, tabulate and compare what went through the machine, what got transmitted over the VPN network, and what's on the thumb drive, and you do all that allocation to make sure nobody's fiddling with the number of votes. But that's just in one day. Can you imagine? Well, not imagine, early voting. You've got those machines on site in a location you don't control for 6 and 7 and 8 days. Well, there's more security issues. You need to make sure that the voting ballot number that was on that machine the night when you close the doors is the same as when you open the door in the morning. So there are processes that are different for Lake County. So we made a suggestion to the government division team, the development team, that they consider maybe doing a subset, doing a 5A and a 5B for in-person and early voting. Up to them what they do, but we at least identified that difference. And we have followed up on, and you can see there's a number of these, there's about 2.5 pages of these differences. I will not call them errors. They are simply a crosswalk between one and the other of things that we are sharing with the government division on what is working well for Lake County and how we're working. All right, let's wrap this thing up. You can tell I'm babbling and I love this thing because it's really working. For those of you who are interested in following up on this for any government process, really, you could use this for any organizational process, the ANSI G1, but it's basically the wording is government. The wording is government organization. But look at this on the left hand column. It's basically the CMMI. It's the maturity auto. There's two of these that are in two of these tables that are in the NCG1 standard. The process maturity model and the system maturity model, because the process can be working fine, but you may not have the interfaces right between the processes. So you have to have a system maturity model as well. And standard. Level 0, you're not using anything. Level 1, initiating, you and I may have learned it as ad hoc. Level 2, We're just starting to understand what's going on. We're standardizing. Level 3, we're streamlining. We've got some measurements. We're working. We understand our requirements. Things are working together. Level 4, you're capable. You understand the validity of your data. You've got some really good measurements. Level 5, people are coming to you to figure out how you're doing it so well. Much more detailed, really, than a lot of the tables that we use teaching uh, Quality 101. This is a really good chart, and this is published at the end of the NCG1 standard. Here is the system maturity model. Again, level 1 through level 5, and take a look at these columns. What's the structure and purpose of this level of your process? Well, there's no general purpose. We're just pulling it out of our back pocket. There's no defined outcome measures. Is there a risk? Well, all kinds of risk, but I'm not sure it would fit in this one frame. Engagement and improvement. Well, apparently nobody's engaged because it's not getting improved. And it gives you some really good direction or suggestions. I'm sorry, direction is probably too strong. Guidance on the things that you want to think about in organizing your system of processes up to an excellence or a best practice level. And we've been using that for our Lake County assessment process. And it has been working really, really well, updating some measures. Now, I will tell you, and you'll run into this as well, the state has a required number of outcome measures that must be reported at the end of every election. Well, I mean, yeah, right. So the outcome measures, the key performance measures, are identified by statute and state law. So that's a given for Lake County. However, the individual process leading indicators, we've had some good conversations about how to improve those indicators. One of the things that Dr. Hayes did early on was meet with the clerks who are the people who run each of the polling locations. There's always one person with the operations manual sitting at a desk that everybody runs to for questions and stuff. The huge operations manual that they have that they can get to, and those clerks then give feedback. They have updated supplies cabinets. They've updated uh, the electronics. They've updated the communications, all because of feedback they're getting from their own employees, and then feedback they get from the voters as well in what they're trying to do. So it's been working really, really well. Now let's come in. We've got what, about 8 minutes for some conversation. Here are some references for you if you want to just with your cell phone take a picture of these. Or yes, you can get these slides, I believe, for like 30 days. The this is recorded. You can get hold of this. If you want to get hold of the Center for Quality Standards, who developed the ANSI G1 standard, you can get copies from the ASQ bookstore. Center for Quality Standards, here's the LinkedIn page. You can also get to it through the Government Division website on asq.org. The Validating a Best Practice book is available through Routledge Press, Validating a Best Practice. It's also available through Amazon. You just find Validating a Best Practice or search on Grace Duffy, and you get a couple of books will come up. They do teach the government division does teach examiner training based on the NCG1 standard and on the best practices system. So this is how to get hold of Dr. Mallory, and then his webpage. And then here is how you can get hold of me, but I've also got this on a final page. So here I am. Get hold of me. I can send you the election operations system map if you're interested in looking at it. I'm happy to talk with you about how we've done the assessment. Basically, it's an audit. It's basically an audit because it's not going to be reported anywhere other than in copyrighted papers and what we're doing, and then we'll make these papers available to government newsletters and journals throughout the country. We just we're happy to share it. So whatever it is. All right, let me come back and hand this back to Ellen
Yep, I've
and
got it.
see what kind of comments in chat we have.
Yeah. Hey, Grace, one question was, um, oh, I can start my video. One question we have is, can you share your slides? I mean, do you mind sharing them on the conference website?
I don't mind at all. These are generic slides. You are welcome to use them.
Okay, great. Another question we have, is there a way for us as quality professionals to get involved in helping our own municipalities improve their voting processes?
Good question. Love it. Well, that's basically what I just did. I would say, well, let me be careful. My approach was go be a poll watcher. Now, in Lake County, generally, if you're a poll watcher, you're either a Republican poll watcher or you're a Democrat poll watcher or you're a Libertarian control watcher, but you must be apolitical while you are in the voting place. You can't say anything, you can't ask questions, you can't approach the voters. There's no way that we're allowed to bias the voting process. But sign up with whatever your party designation is because they all have excellent training. And then watch what goes on so that you have some frame of reference, and then meet with your supervisor of elections and let them know what your experience was, that you have a background, that you'd be very interested in getting involved with what you're doing. I know Lake County hires paid election workers and they train you. There is a phenomenal set of training available for election watchers. You don't have to be a full time county employee to be able to work that process. So, yes, approach your supervisor of elections. My experience is they're very, very approachable. They are very interested in helping the voter get where they need to be.
Great. Thanks, Grace. We do have one other question, and it was, do you think this can be applied outside the United States, for example, Canada or Mexico?
I don't see why not. Now you'd need the foundational document of what Canada or Mexico or what the individual states or provinces expect to do so that you have the foundational document that you can do a gap analysis with. If they're still at just ad hoc at a level 1 to 0, 1 or 2, then you really don't have enough to compare. But once you get to a level 3 of maturity where the processes are documented, sure. And then you're just doing a standard gap analysis like we do as auditors. Yes, by all means.
Okay, thanks, Grace. I don't see any other questions. Does anyone have a question to ask? If you do, please put it in the chat. Um,
I love that someone just said this is very helpful. As I'm signing up as a voting supervisor for my upcoming municipal elections,
yeah,
phenomenal. I'm really glad you're doing that. We are here as citizens. We are here now. We all have our own view of who should be voting and who should not be voting. And the states are all different in the US. I don't know about Mexico and I don't know about Canada. So
yeah,
you've got to, check with your local authorities.
right.
Oh, and
So
Zach has a question. Yeah.
one more question, and then we'll have to end. Where do you see this
Yeah.
going in the future? Does this
Does the
county?
county plan to, oh, yes. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. Yes, we are going to finish all 11 of the activities. Now, it's possible, well, as a matter of fact, I'm giving this presentation to the Orlando ASQ section meeting. No, that's not true. I'm doing modular Kaizen, but I'm doing this for a New York, Long Island ASQ section meeting. So I can give this presentation in local section meetings, but we are going to finish. We are going to probably do the presentation of this full journey at supervisor of elections conferences and other government conferences, either virtually or on site. There's probably one in New Orleans sometime next January, I think. So yes, we're going to share this and we're going to keep going. They love it. They're just delighted.
Great. Thanks, Grace. And I think you have, do you have the link to the ASQ
Yes, it's
ANSI
right
G1
here.
standard in your, good. Okay, great, because
Yeah,
we're
the
going to
G1
post
state.
these.
There you go. Quality press.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Grace. I think we're at time, and I appreciate you, your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Grace's slides will be posted on the conference site after this presentation time, and hope everyone has a great rest of the conference. And thank you, Grace, for your time.
Thanks so much. It was a delight. Bye bye, everybody. Hope to hear from you.
Thanks.